the DNA evidence that would lead them to Kohberger. The pivotal moment came when authorities were able to obtain Kohberger's DNA. By conducting a routine search of his family's trash in Pennsylvania, the DNA sample taken from his trash was compared to DNA found at the scene of the murders, and it was a match. This revelation was the key to Kohberger's arrest, and it shattered any remaining doubts about his involvement in the crime. As investigators pieced together the timeline of Kohberger's movements, they realized that he had been in Moscow around the time of the murders. Kohberger had also been living in Pullman, Washington, just a short distance from Moscow, where he was studying criminal justice at Washington State University. The proximity between his residence and the crime scene, combined with his academic background, made him a particularly interesting suspect. What's even more chilling is the fact that Kohberger's arrest came after weeks of suspicion surrounding other individuals in the community. The fact that the killer had evaded capture for so long left investigators scrambling for leads, and as more time passed, the police began to feel pressure from the public to make an arrest. Building the case, surveillance, and forensic evidence from the moment the victims were found, investigators launched a large-scale operation to identify potential suspects. The police canvassed the area, interviewed witnesses, and combed through every scrap of evidence they could find. In a town like Moscow, where such a brutal crime was almost unheard of, the investigators' work was under constant scrutiny from the media and the community early on. The police focused on gathering any available surveillance footage in the area. The house where the murders took place was located near a busy street, and investigators quickly identified several surveillance cameras in the vicinity. The footage was reviewed, and the authorities were able to determine that a white Hyundai Elantra had been seen near the house around the time of the murders. This car would become a key piece of evidence in the case. The police released an appeal to the public for any information about the vehicle. It wasn't long before tips began flooding in, with people reporting sightings of similar cars. Investigators then used these leads to track down the owner of the white Hyundai Elantra, which eventually led them to Bryan Kohberger. At the same time, law enforcement worked to establish a clear timeline of events. They interviewed individuals who had known the victims and began to piece together the last few hours of the students' lives. Surveillance footage and phone records were analyzed to determine where the victims had been and when the killer might have entered the house. A significant breakthrough came when the authorities examined phone records of both the victims and the suspect. They discovered that Kohberger had been in the vicinity of the crime scene multiple times leading up to the murders, raising suspicions that he had been stalking the victims in the days before the attack. Kohberger's movements during that time were scrutinized in detail, and investigators were able to map out a timeline of his presence near the house. The psychological profile of Bryan Kohberger. Investigators delved deeper into Bryan Kohberger's life and background. They began to uncover disturbing details that shed light on his motivations.